there can be a couple different things going on before projects even thought of. And this is why some of the things I do on mentorDINO are so important. I always advocate that relationships are actually the number one thing an architect does and what should be more important than design. Hello, I'm Caitlin Rosier, a licensed architect and founder of mentorDINO is your go-to resource for professional growth and development. In 2023, I launched this YouTube channel to share experiences, stories, and resources with you. But I need your help to be able to host live panel discussions, interviews, on-site trainings, and mentorship groups. I need to hit 1,000 subscribers to be able to do that on YouTube. So I'd really appreciate your support in hitting the subscribe button below and letting your colleagues know about this resource. Let's build a brighter future together. Welcome to mentorDINO. Now let's dive into the discussion. What does an architect do? In this video, I'm going to go over the before we get a project part to what happens on the initial phase part. And there can be a couple different things going on before projects even born or thought of. And this is why some of the things I do on mentorDINO are so important. So I always advocate that relationships are actually the number one thing an architect does and what should be more important than design. Because if it wasn't for relationships, a lot of projects wouldn't fall into certain firms' laps. It wouldn't be different opportunities, and people wouldn't know to come to you. So it's about advocating for design, but you need to foster and build those relationships, and that's sometimes where the beginning phases start. So a lot of the times we go to networking events, we talk to people, we give mini presentations to clients to how we can benefit them and how we can support them in their goals. We can talk to them about where their growth is going in the future. A lot of the times healthcare and higher education facilities really have that gauge on where things are going and what they're planning for. And so during this phase, it's a lot about talking to people and just seeing what's going on and how we can help. Once somebody is one of your clients, it's a lot easier to have that relationship on through a project, but there is a lot of work to foster to get new relationships and new work in the door with new clients. And so we are oftentimes networking and going out and being in the community. Once a project is generated in terms of an idea for the owner or the owner wants to pursue it, they will either go find an architect to do the work or they will put out a request for a proposal or RFP from a variety of firms. It may be a open-ended RFP, or it may be the owner comes up to 4 firms that they would like to come in to interview for the work. During this process, you'll be working with the marketing team and business development team in your office to put together a proposal packet for them. Oftentimes, the owners will have their set agenda in terms of what they need for a proposal. Oftentimes, we put it in that same organization, but each firm will have their own little packet. It's a lot like putting together a portfolio. And so a lot like what you do in college and putting together what project work you're doing and you're trying to tell a story, the same thing's happening on the proposal end, but it's typically a lot more words as well. And they do also tend to want to know what the fees are for your firm, similar work you've done, so it shows that your experience and the team's working together, and who's going to actually physically be on the project, which goes back to why relationships are so important. If somebody in your firm's been fostering a relationship for a long time, or they really know a client, they will really want that person to be on the firm to help build that trust so they can start learning other people in the firm. So during this proposal phase, you may not be a part of the work as much as a young professional, but some firms do want young professionals in that workflow to help teach you the process, and you should have some experience whenever you're getting your registration hour requirement. And so once the proposal's together, they will let you know if digital copies are acceptable or if they need physical copies, when it needs to be sent. There's usually a deadline that's usually pretty close. The sooner the deadline, I usually think, is a little bit better because you could spin your wheels a while on it, but it can be a rapid fire to get something done. And that's where relationships in the beginning and being able to forecast and see what projects are coming down the line can be helpful, because if your firm knows a big project's going to be coming down from a client you typically work with, then they can position themselves to already have some stuff set up for the proposal. So then if you only have a week to get something together, you generally have something already formulated. You've already been talking about it with other people in your office, and you have an action plan. If you don't know what's coming, you have to figure out that action plan really quickly and execute. and get that done and out the door. After the proposals are sent out, typically there is at least one interview. And so that is where a few people from the full packet proposal, which does include engineers and any consultants. If you do not have engineering in-house, then you typically will bring another company in to be a consultant for you. And you do have those people come to the interview as well to also showcase that you guys have worked together in the past and how they can help on the project. So during the interview phase, it's typically team leads or least project architect or higher, if not project manager. But there are opportunities if your office is practicing and going through that information. I usually recommend young architects trying to get in the room to watch how the practice happens for a proposal, because I know I did that early on in my career and it was super helpful. So I could see how messy something could be, and within a day it is pulled together and they're able to execute. And that really helped me for the first time I went after an interview, and I was really calm in being able to express my point for what I needed to hit for that interview, and we did end up winning the project. So that interview stage, if it's just one, you'll know pretty quick on what happens. Sometimes they will try to do 2 interviews. So if they're bringing in 10 firms for the first interview, they may bring it down to 3 or 4 firms for a second interview. So you're trying to make sure you get into that last interview to hear back. Then typically there'll be a time period where they're reviewing all the different proposals and the interviews and whoever the decision makers are for that project to make a decision who they want to move forward with. Sometimes it's a very quick turnaround depending on how quick a project needs to start. And sometimes they may take a week or 2, or if you hit the holidays, that tends to drag things out. So sometimes you're more in a waiting period. But when you figure out those timelines and when you're going after work, you also have to look at your staff workload to see what is going on, who are you currently have in the office, who's on the docket to be on the project, and do we have time for our staff to do the work? So that does come into play whenever there's timing involved. If we have a little bit more time, sometimes some other projects can dwindle out and get out the door and be done, and there'll be more room for your staff. So that's a little tidbit of what we do during the proposal phase in terms of putting together a portfolio, having interviews, practicing, and on that end of business development. So I hope you guys like learning a little bit about what an architect does during that before a project starts phase.